Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Danny Jacobs. And let's just go through this because, Canelo Alvarez has proven that he only wants to fight the best. No elite level, top level fighter fights every fight at an elite level. And so even though Canelo Alvarez fights elite fighters, he's fought the most elite fighters out of all active fighters today, period. You cannot name anyone's resume who's better than Canelo Alvarez, who has more elite level, Hall of Fame level, top level fighters on his resume. Canelo Alvarez already has a Miguel Cotto, a Gennady Golovkin, a Floyd Mayweather, and now a Danny Jacobs. You have to understand that Canelo Alvarez keeps adding top level opposition to his resume. And regardless whether he wins or loses the fights, the fact that he keeps fighting the best is what matters. He's a world champion, he's a proven fighter, and he's elite level. And that's something that guys don't always want to give him credit. And if we compare the Canelo Alvarez and Danny Jacobs and break this down as the best fighting the best in our first look, our first glance, and our first breakdown of this particular fight, there's more breakdowns to come. If we just break it down initially from what we see between these two great fighters, we look at Daniel Jacobs. Daniel Jacobs is the IBF world champion. He has a record of 35-2 with 29 knockouts. Danny Jacobs is a top level fighter. He's an elite level fighter. Yes, Danny Jacobs did lose and get stopped by Dmitry Pirog, but let's be honest about that. Danny Jacobs was battling cancer. Danny Jacobs was having a lot of issues as his grandmother just passed, and he still fought that fight anyway. He had a lot of issues that was anomalies. And you say, well, how could it be an anomaly? This is why it's an anomaly. Because if you're not a casual boxing fan, if you understand and know boxing, you'll realize that Danny Jacobs, the reason why that fight happened that way is that Danny Jacobs had all those issues going on, and he never had a fight anywhere near similar to that again. Now, let's fast forward, and Danny Jacobs lost a very close decision to Triple G. A lot of people felt Danny Jacobs won that fight. A lot of people felt Triple G edged it, but it was a very close fight. Whether you had anyone winning, it should have been by no more than a point. I would have been happy to call that fight at least a draw because I felt like both of those guys did enough to win. On the other end, you hear a lot of fanboys and haters crying about Danny Jacobs versus Magi Sulecki. Now, let's be honest about Magi Sulecki. Danny Jacobs dropped him in the 12th round of that fight. Danny Jacobs clearly outpointed him in that fight and won more rounds than him in that fight, not only dropping him, but winning more rounds. And yes, Danny Jacobs had a lot of close competitive rounds with Sulecki in that fight. But let's be honest about Danny Jacobs. Danny Jacobs is a guy who fought multiple undefeated fighters in a row. I believe he fought 4 undefeated fighters in a row. So you have to understand that when you're fighting top level opposition, when you're fighting guys that are going to challenge you with different styles, sometimes those fights are difficult. Just because you're in a competitive fight does not mean you lost. And I think that's what people misunderstand about Danny Jacobs, is because no way did he lose that fight. If you're a true boxing fan and you watch that fight unbiased, you will know that Danny Jacobs clearly beat Magi Sulecki. Magi Sulecki never cried robbery. There was no robbery outcry. He even dropped him in the final round to definitely secure the fight. Danny Jacobs is an elite level boxer who has not lost a fight since Dmitry Pirog, because in my opinion, the Gennady Golovkin fight was a draw. If we want to be unbiased about his resume and what he's accomplished, Danny Jacobs is an elite level, top level fighter, and he's going to come to fight. His most recent fight against Sergey Derevyanchenko, a lot of guys aren't going to give him credit and say, well, that was a very difficult fight for Danny Jacobs. Well, let's break down what the fight was. In my opinion, I feel like it was the same. It was a very close and competitive fight at certain points, but Danny Jacobs clearly won the most rounds. I didn't give Dmitry Pirog more than 3-4 rounds at max. And I'm sorry, not Dmitry, Sergey Derevyanchenko more than 3-4 rounds max. And Sergey Derevyanchenko is a top level fighter, and I believe he'd beat a lot of fighters. But you have to understand that Danny Jacobs had, Sergey Derevyanchenko as a sparring partner. And not only did he have him as a sparring partner, these guys know each other very well. They sparred over 150 rounds, so they know each other's powers, they know each other's strengths, they know each other's weaknesses, they know each other's reflexes and moves and timing. So these guys are very familiar. So it's going to be extremely difficult to come in and fight a guy who you have such a connection and experience with in the ring, especially in sparring, that knows you so well. 9 times out of 10, you're never going to encounter that level of comfort against another fighter. So you got to expect that that's going to be a difficult fight in and of itself. So then you see Danny Jacobs, he fought Luis Arias, 18-0, Magi Sulecki, 26-0, and Sergey Deverenchenko, 12-0. So he took 3 straight fights against 3 undefeated fighters in a row. And prior to that, he fought Gennady Golovkin, who was 36-0 at the time. In my opinion, I felt like that was at least a draw. You have to be honest and unbiased. A lot of people say he had an issue against Sergio Mora. He stopped Sergio Mora in the 7th round. What are you talking about? You're going to have guys grasping and reaching at straws trying to discredit Danny Jacobs so they don't have to give Saul Canelo Alvarez the credit. And that's what we call bias, and basically just an outright fanboy of other networks or a biased narrative. If we're being honest, Danny Jacobs is an elite level opponent. He's a proven fighter and he's a world champion. On the other end, Saul Canelo Alvarez is the WBC, the WBA world champion. He has a record of 54 wins, 1 defeat, and 2 draws with 35 knockouts. Saul Canelo Alvarez is at the pinnacle of boxing. You have to be honest. There's no one you can name in boxing now with, I guess, is a better record than Canelo Alvarez with the type of names that he has on his records. And, he's a 3-division world champion. Canelo Alvarez has proven so much. I think this is going to be a great fight. It's a 50-50 fight, and I can see this fight ending in a myriad of ways. I can see Canelo Alvarez potentially hurting Danny Jacobs in some instances, and I also see Danny being able to hurt Canelo. I think it's a very good and interesting fight. I think Canelo has a solid chin, a granite chin, and I don't think Danny Jacobs could hit Canelo Alvarez any harder than he's been hit against Triple G. But Danny Jacobs' advantage in this fight is that, unlike Triple G, that Danny Jacobs is an elite level boxer, not just an elite level fighter, but an elite level boxer as well. So he's going to be able to hit Canelo Alvarez with certain shots that Triple G just was not able to do. Danny Jacobs is not going to get completely outboxed like Triple G was. So you have to be honest and unbiased in that analysis that Danny Jacobs is going to show a lot more skills in the ring. He's going to show a lot more movement. He's going to present a unique challenge that Canelo Alvarez has not faced since he fought a guy like an Erislandy Lara. So you have to understand that Danny Jacobs is going to present a unique set of challenges. But on the reverse end, Canelo Alvarez is going to present a unique set of challenges to Danny Jacobs. Danny Jacobs has never fought a boxer, a pure boxer, an elite boxer at this level in his career. So you have to understand that this is not a guy that Danny Jacobs can straight steamroll. This is going to be a guy that's going to go to Danny Jacobs' body. He's going to go early and often, and he's going to try to take the steam out of Danny Jacobs. He's going to try to slow Danny Jacobs down with that. And Canelo Alvarez is an elite level counterpuncher. So any aggression that Danny Jacobs shows to Canelo Alvarez, he's going to use it against him and counter him all night, because we know that Danny Jacobs can get hit. So we have to understand that this is going to be a fantastic and amazing fight. It's going to be a 50-50 fight, and I think it's going to be a pure dog fight to the end. I think it's going to be a phenomenal fight, and in my opinion, I think that this is the type of fight that's going to get a rematch. And a lot of people say, why would you say that this fight's going to be a rematch? What makes you think that? Well, if you don't realize, the news has come out that Danny Jacobs has signed a 3-fight deal with DAZN. And I believe that this is the first fight on that deal. The second fight, I honestly think, could potentially be a rematch with Canelo if it's a close fight, if it's a draw, or if it's a win for Danny Jacobs. I see this fight as 50-50. I think Canelo has a slight edge so far in my mind, based on the fact that I know Canelo has a granite chin. So I'm going to give Canelo the edge in that department. I understand that Canelo's body work is impeccable. He hurt Triple G to the body. That was one of the first time I've ever seen Triple G back up when Canelo Alvarez was hitting him with thundering body shots. He got Triple G off of him. That is the type of body work that we've never seen implored on a Danny Jacobs, and this is going to be interesting to see how Danny Jacobs reacts to that. So it's a 50-50 fight. I'm leaning towards Canelo Alvarez because I think that Canelo Alvarez has the slight advantages in those ways, but what keeps evening out the fight to me is that Danny Jacobs is not only an elite level fighter, but he also has height and reach advantage, which he will use against Canelo Alvarez. No other fighter Canelo has fought has this type of boxing ability to be able to use those advantages adequately against Canelo. So this is going to be a very close fight, a very good fight, and an amazing fight. And once again, this proves that Saul Canelo Álvarez only fights the best. Once again, it's the IBFP Unbiased. As always, please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.